to episode 33 of the Hard Truth About B2B e-commerce. I'm your co-host, Isaiah Bollinger. I realized I said episode 33 on the last one, and it was actually 32. So
okay.
I apologize for that.
We'll have to edit that. We'll have to edit that episode. So.
But go ahead, Tim.
Yes, hi, I'm Timothy Peterson. I'm co-host of this amazing podcast, and thank you to all our listeners. It's the middle of season 2, 33 episodes altogether. This is pretty incredible.
I think episode 14 of season 2.
14 of season 2. So great stuff. So let me mention our sponsor. We have a great sponsor, Punch Out To Go. They are a global B2B integration company specializing in connecting commerce business platforms with e-procurement and ERP applications. Punch Out To Go's iPaaS technology seamlessly links business applications to automate the flow of purchasing data. With their solution, you can immediately reduce integration complexities for Punch Out catalogs, electronic purchase orders, invoice, and other B2B sales order automation documents. Thank you to our sponsor, and let me throw it right back to you, Isaiah, to introduce our guest this week.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to have Brett Sinclair join us all the way from Australia. I believe you're our first Australian guest.
Awesome.
So really appreciate, it was a little bit of a dance to find a time, but it worked out, and I think we're on different days right now.
It's Friday in the US. I'm in New York, and it's what day and time is it in Australia?
Yeah, it's Saturday morning here, guys, 10 a.m. So yeah, you've taken my weekend, but that's all right. Like I said, you got me out of something that I didn't want to do with my girlfriend, so I'm happy.
I can't wait till she might see this later, so you might get in trouble.
Yeah, no,
you might have to edit that out.
Yeah, e-commerce will put her to sleep, so it's all good.
That's hilarious. Well, yeah, I've been following you on LinkedIn for a while now, and I just was really intrigued by what you were doing. So I was like, I haven't seen anything like this. And obviously we've been talking about, right now you're focusing on Australia, but hopefully that will grow, and we may grow that with you beyond Australia. So explain what that is and how you got into this. I don't think a lot of, especially here in the US, people really don't know what you're doing. So.
Yeah, sure. So I'll try and give you the shorter version of the story, but I've been involved in the e-commerce space for nearly over 10 years now. And previously, when I first started to move into the B2B space and working with a lot of manufacturers and wholesale distributors here locally, that was probably around 7 years ago. So my first 3 years, I was more focused working in the retail space on the merchant side. And yeah, I found myself helping manufacturers, wholesale distributors set up e-commerce operations. And I guess one of the challenges I found when I was working in the space was I was constantly doing a lot of re-education of e-commerce and the foundations that drive e-commerce success. So I started to think, wouldn't it be great if there was an educational resource out there where people working in these B2B companies could come and get a foundational learning experience about e-commerce and digital transformation, and how they need to be thinking about this space in order to set themselves up for success. So I kind of turned that idea over in my head for quite a few years, actually. And I kind of was building out, what that might look like. And it was just something that I, was always in the back of my mind that I wanted to get to. And then I started to look around, in the, from a retail perspective about how we were, organizing the e-commerce and the online retail community here locally. And it started to get quite well established. We've got some really awesome association groups down here, like the National Online Retailers Association called NORA. We have another group called Power Retail that's done some really awesome stuff in educating the retailers about e-commerce, and they've built some really great communities and networks. So I sort of just looking around, and it's like, wow, no one is organizing the B2B community in any way. The resources were out there, there's a lot of white papers and ebooks, and the content was really starting to get ramped up over the past 5 years from various tech providers and guys like yourselves that are doing great stuff like this podcast. But then I thought, well, what we really need to do is start an association and bring all the key players together, so we can start to build a community and have a conversation. And I guess what we're trying to achieve at the association is to have a place where a newbie, or I guess someone more experienced as well, can come and have a learning experience, depending on what level they're at. And then as they start to get that education, they can then also connect with the relevant service providers in the space that can help them achieve the goals that they've got and the challenges that they've got. Because I think that's one of the big problems right now is that it's very hard for these B2B organizations to find the right partners or know what partners they should be connecting with, because as you guys know, it's not the same as retail. There's a lot of things that overlap, but there's a lot of key differences, and finding the right partners that can help you go along the journey is a really big challenge, particularly in this market.
So let me just interject and ask a quick question, just for a little more detail for our listeners. So what sort of virtual events have you been doing, in the last almost year during COVID? What types of things has your organization done?
Yeah, so we launched officially the association back in May last year. And the key focus since that launch has been building out a library of resources from all the various partners that are offering solutions and services. So we've got, if you go to the website, you can see we've built a whole bunch of ebooks and white papers. We've got thought leadership now being pumped out from various providers in the market. So we strategically, as a group, we have a board, and we also have what's called an expert advisory panel. So we've got key people from various systems integrators and technology companies that have more specific experience in B2B as part of this panel. So if you're looking for people that understand the space and have a conversation and not just e-commerce platforms, it could be marketing automation or PIM systems. We have those people. And then now, we're starting to roll out events in 2021. So we've got a calendar of content that's going to be pushed out. So really exciting, because we've got the partners that we have leaning in to create some events specific for the association and the goals that we're trying to achieve. So it's great.
I'm curious, what kind of feedback? I mean, it sounds like you've gotten fairly positive feedback. Like what's kind of being stirred up by all this? Like, seems like the partners are getting engaged. Are you getting the actual B2B companies to start getting engaged? Have you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we're finding, like, when we push out content, we're getting people signing up. The database is growing quickly. All of our partners are, notifying their customers that, now we've got a B2B resource. You guys should check this out and sign up. Because I think that's the thing. Like, everyone knows that, people are out there, and there is a community. It just hasn't been brought together. And I'm constantly getting LinkedIn messages from merchants saying, "Oh, this is a great idea. There's nothing out there." And because the other thing I'm really hoping to create for people as part of this is career opportunities as well. Because and I've heard some of your guests talk about it before. There's a lot of challenges in recruitment as well. It's like finding people that can work in a B2B organization. So, I'm also really, my day job, I mean, I work a lot in the retail space as well. But I think, for us down here, like, we're going to have to get, to build the resources in the B2B e-commerce space. A lot of that's going to have to come from the retail community. So, a lot of the people working in retail e-commerce don't even know B2B e-commerce exists.
True.
So it's kind of crazy, right? So,
Yeah.
but there's huge opportunities for them. I think there's, massive opportunities for people that have, maybe done 5-10 years in the retail digital space to take some of those skills and move into the B2B space. But there's going to be a big learning curve in a lot of areas, but understand the foundations, I guess, of digital and e-com. It's going to be quite helpful, but I think that's really important moving forward.
What's really interesting to me, in a conversation I actually had today, I was talking to somebody who's working in a startup that works on 3D imagery, VR, AR, and they focus exclusively to this point on B2C. And I just said, what about B2B? That was like one of my only questions, right? And they're like, oh, we hadn't thought about B2B. And it was remarkable to me because it's a startup that's pretty far along, that has pretty sophisticated solution, and they hadn't even brought it up, right? It's very strange how that happens. And now it's like, okay, maybe I spurred something, but it's amazing to me that it didn't get there already. Like they didn't think about this.
And so in the US, do you find the same challenges with B2B organizations being able to have, recruit the right talent?
That's basically, it's not the only reason, but this is a big reason we started this podcast is, Trellis, similar to you, we were working with a lot of B2B. I've been working with B2B companies since 2012, and it's just so much education, so much challenge kind of educating the market and also helping them get talent a lot of the times. I've turned down deals. I'm like, I don't think you have the internal people to run this project, and we're just going to fail. You know what I mean? Like Trellis will fail because, it's like, I was thinking in my head, it's like you get a mortgage, right? And me and my girlfriend are getting a rental property. You have to do things or you miss the deadline, right? Like they will not give you the mortgage if you don't do all these things they ask. And I think that's where a lot of B2B companies don't realize there's a lot they need to do to work with a service provider like Trellis. And if you don't have the internal talent to do that, there's not really much you can do, and then I think that problem is they don't even know who to hire. What is the skill set?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I think it's the same thing. It's like, how do you hire for roles that you don't understand?
Exactly.
So
how do you write a job description for that? Like they don't know how to write. I've actually helped companies and they were like, we're going to hire a marketing manager. I was like, no. You need an e-commerce manager. I helped them write the job description, and it actually works. They actually got a much better person that was,
So I kind of feel like, at the moment we're going through the B2B market here is kind of going through the same cycle that the retail market went through. 10, 15 years ago, they started to launch, e-commerce sites. They thought they could delegate to the marketing coordinator or the marketing manager or the IT guy. The IT guy said he can build a website, and some of them are there. Like some of them have already made that mistake, and now they're going again. There's heaps of that right now, but then there's some that are still falling into that trap because they've COVID's come along and they're accelerating their plans now. And it's great that they want to move quickly, but there's just a lot that they're not thinking about. But that could also work in their favor as well, because I think there's a lot of B2B companies that just spend a lot of time spinning their wheels and going to analysis paralysis, and they really just need to get started.
Yeah.
So,
tell us about that. What do you see? I guess we're already kind of talking about it, but what is, especially since COVID, what are you seeing in the market? It sounds like people are more eager to do things, but some of them are still kind of stuck in strategy or research.
Well, I think it's moving. It's moving a lot faster now. I think in the past it moved a lot slower than everyone would have liked that is, working in this space. Looking back and some of the stuff I was doing, I was probably pretty early at the time, and maybe because I was just so green, I felt probably a bit frustrated that, it was hard to get the buy-in. But there's a silver lining of COVID, I guess, is that it's made a lot of the executives and senior managers in these organizations, actually have to stop and go, okay, we need this now, and I'm going to have to understand it. I can't just keep putting it off and saying, I'll get to it later. So they've really kind of had to stop and see, how they can make this work. And yeah, and that, I think that's resulting in, you know, decisions are being made way faster. You know, previously, you know, companies that might spend, you know, 6, 12 months, maybe even longer, fluffing around, you know, I'm seeing them moving stuff, you know, making decisions within a couple of months. And yeah, so, you know, that's great. And I think there's, you know, and I think as well, they're more willing to just accept, you know, an MVP approach, and they're asking, you know, how can we get something out the door? And I think that's actually a good thing, because, you know, often, I'm sure you guys see it all the time, like, you know, everyone's trying to set the world on fire, or they want to plan out, you know, every step of the journey. And, you know, that's what makes it hard, and, you know, really, I guess, builds the abdominal tension, you know, in the boardroom when they see this huge project and, you know, these big numbers, when really it's just the hardest part, really, just to get started, I reckon.
Yeah, I think that I would actually say that might be the biggest problem in B2B and B2B e-commerce, is that the culture in most of these companies is like so much, you know, deliberation and thinking about, oh, should we do that? Like, what platform should we choose? What agent? Like, so much time spent on an RFP, and probably way too many requirements, trying to do this one big project, and that ends up lasting for years. You know, we've taken over projects where one that they've been working on it for 2 years and it wasn't live. And in 3 months, we're like, look, we're just going to get this live. Like, that's all we're going to do, is just like get a website live with the we had the integration to Infor that I was telling you about. So we had the integration product, and we just, this happened to just be on Magento. So we're just like, we just got it live. And it turns out their biggest problem is product data. But it's good. They probably wouldn't have realized that. They spent another 2 years just working on the project. We exposed a problem that was even, I think, bigger than they had realized by just getting live. Because we're like, look, I can't fix all your images. Like, I'm not going to go. You're not going to pay me at Trellis, and you want to pay me $175 an hour to like go fix all your images. It's bad use of
Well, I think people are more motivated as well when they see it live, and, you know, then they see some of the gaps. They're probably more motivated to fix it.
Exactly. Live and just having something was like, in my opinion, the best thing that could have happened for this company.
Well, and you know, one of the other things that that I found very interesting, I was talking with someone else about this, is that you know, B2C, it was a service, an analysis of like why, for at least a long time, B2C was innovating more quickly, what was happening, why was B2C moving, you know, and basically the analysis came to the point where it's like, well, the end consumer would scream for something or raise an issue or whatever, and then people would scramble and say, well, let's figure out how to deal with that and continue the innovation. But in B2B, it was more of a closed loop, where people weren't necessarily complaining to their very limited sets of connections and whatever. And so it had to get opened up, or there had to be a crisis in order for, you know, there to be an acceleration, for things to move much more quickly. It was an interesting, you know, thought, and I kind of agreed with it. It wasn't 100% on the ball, but I pretty much agreed with it.
Yeah. So let's change gears. I think I'm looking at the topics, and you keep answering them without us even.
Oh,
we're that good. We're that good.
I think we're done. You already answered everything. No, I'm just kidding. So I think you're in your day job. You do some work for Adobe, but I don't want to just, you know, we're obviously an Adobe partner. I don't want to be too biased at Adobe, but tell us at a broader perspective, the partners and the platforms that you're seeing. You know, obviously Adobe and Magento is a big B2B platform and player in the space, very big in Australia. I think they have a big Australia presence. But just tell us kind of a little bit what you're seeing. You know, obviously Magento is one of the players, but I noticed on the website with the association, you have kind of like all the ones that we talk about on the podcast. You have, you know, commerce tools and SAP and BigCommerce and Salesforce Commerce, but like you have kind of the major players that we talk about. So I'm just curious to hear what you're seeing in Australia and maybe how different that is from the US, you know.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's been the great part about the association. You know, it's not biased towards any one solution. It's, you know, we've got all the major platforms involved, and, you know, everyone's leaning in pretty hard in the B2B space. I mean, it's been a big focus area for a while for most commerce platforms, particularly more in the enterprise space, end of town, I suppose, that have that capability, and it's been there for a while, right? It's not this has been there for a long time. It's not necessarily new, but I think people have been talking about the size of the market, that opportunity. So all these platforms are really investing heavily into creating content and stories around B2B. From a product perspective, they're all going very hard. I know Magento product at Adobe, big part of our roadmap is focused on keep enhancing our B2B capabilities, making it easier for customers to deliver on some of those complex use cases that there are in B2B, and making merchandising and product recommendations, those types of things easier. So yeah, I mean, there's it's just I think a really big focus for most commerce platforms, and you're seeing those retail focused platforms like the Shopify's and the big commerce platforms starting to lean more into B2B. They're investing heavily into their B2B capabilities, and it's clear that they see that as a huge opportunity for them in the future.
Yeah, I know for a fact, BigCommerce is doing quite a bit around B2B, and I think you'll see quite a bit of things this year that'll really accelerate their ability to execute in B2B. So they're certainly one. Obviously, I've just talked to someone that we don't do Salesforce Commerce Cloud, so I'm not super familiar with it personally in terms of like in the weeds, but apparently they kind of like rewrote Cloud Craze. I guess they bought Cloud Craze and then they kind of rewrote it into their own software on the B2B side. It seems to be getting a lot of traction. So
and I would say that probably more than 50% nearly of the new business or the conversations that people are wanting to have with us at Magento, it's it's B2B use cases, or they're B2B, or it's B2B and B2C.
Hybrid.
They hybrid, that's massive down here, especially, we've got a lot of distributors that own, the licenses to various brands and they're wanting to have that B2B capability, but then we also be able to launch microsites or deliver a really B2C style experience for their B2B customers. So that
big. Makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think that the hybrid is a really good approach that more and more B2B. I think there's an interesting intersection, right? I think what I think is going to happen is it's going to become like almost this spectrum where like B2C companies are becoming B2B. Like my girlfriend does, she's on the Home Depot Pros, whatever website. I don't know. She's like, like almost like a consumer, but she has we have a kind of like an Airbnb rental business together and that she runs. And so she's buying lots of furniture all the time and like, just B2B things. And she's now a B2B customer, but it's like very consumer experience.
Well, this is the crazy thing. Like sometimes I'm seeing now, like there's some big retailers here that are starting to play in the B2B space.
That's what I'm saying.
Right? And then and that's the scary thing for these wholesale distributors that are dragging their feet, is that they're cutting into what should be your market. With a B2B, you should have a B2B e-commerce platform, and hitting this. Maybe it's I'm seeing a lot of retailers maybe trying to tap into the corporate market, and that territory would usually be the distributor or the manufacturer who would maybe go and could set something up and sell direct to corporates. Now you've got the retailers saying, no, well, I've got all the systems in place and I can offer just as good pricing. I'm going to go.
It's fascinating in a way, because it's not even just that. I mean, it's also the marketplace component, right? Which everyone's trying to figure out where they are with the marketplace, so it's B2B, B2C, the marketplace. And then it's all of the, whatever people want to call it, but it's like the used goods, angle, and so there are all of these suppliers or brands that are trying to get back, relatively recent or specific components, let's say, or the apparel brands. Like there's an apparel brand, I can't mention their name because I'm working with them right now, but they're doing all of these things, which is very strange. They're getting involved in like used clothes of theirs, you know, from ages ago, trying to figure out the reseller market for that. It's really extraordinary how that's all this happened in the last few years. And you need great, you know, tech and tools, you know, to get that kind of stuff done.
Yeah, the marketplaces is a very
Absolutely.
interesting place. I mean, you have like, you know, Home Depots of the world, Wayfair. I mean, they're big in the US. I'm not sure what their presence is in Australia, but Wayfair is a good example of like, you think a very B2C company in furniture in the United States, one of the biggest furniture retailers in the United States. But they have I think close to $1 billion B2B division now. So if you can get a B2B account, and they'll call you immediately. Like they want you to buy more, you know, if you become a B2B customer.
Well, that's you know, and I think down here we haven't had the same impact. The Amazon effect hasn't had the same impact yet on B2B here locally. So they, you know, they only entered the market, you know, a few years ago. So, you know, it's interesting to see how that's going to play out down here over the next few years.
Well, Amazon itself is huge. I mean, that's another thing I would just say here for B2B. I mean, now that you mentioned the Amazon effect. So yeah, I mean, it's huge.
We order from Amazon B2B all the time at work, just keyboards and things. But I'm just curious, what are the marketplaces that seem to be doing well in Australia now? Amazon seems to be pretty new, it sounds like, but where are people ordering? Is it mostly from the actual companies themselves? Or
It's interesting actually. So we've got, I mean, eBay has always been big in Australia. It's still the biggest, I think. And we've had some pure play online retailers be really successful in the marketplace category. So one's called Catch of the Day, and the other one is called Kogan. And you know, they basically have partnered with all of the major manufacturers, wholesale distributors. A lot of them started out, I mean, Catch of the Day started out as really being a deal site where you had a lot of the B2B companies would, you know, give them their old stock that they no longer wanted, and they'd go really hard on the discount, they'd clear it. But it's kind of evolved now into being more of a, you know, marketplace where, you know, you're not necessarily going there to get a deal. It's just because they've got a massive range, and Kogan's similar. So and then we've had Amazon come in, and I know that, you know, through some of the conversations I've had with various B2B companies that, you know, they're very aggressive on wanting to partner and take stock from these companies. So, you know, that's growing quickly, but I think it's still a while off catching up to some of those guys, but potentially. But in the B2B space, we've just had a new company launch called TradeSquare, which is a B2B marketplace. It's only maybe launched 3 or 4 months ago. And so that's going to be really interesting to follow. And, you know, I've been in touch with those guys, and, you know, they're basically, you know, targeting, you know, your market as a company, Isaiah, the small business, medium business that wants to, you know, order just their product for whatever category it might be. I think they're really trying to get ahead of the Amazon B2B experience that's coming, you know, down here.
So a small business like us who might spend 20, 30,000 a year on furniture or whatever it is.
Correct.
I'd have to look at the numbers, but, you know, we're not like a massive company spending millions on these things, but it's still significant. It adds up. And
so marketplace is growing. You know, we've got heaps of opportunities in the marketplace category. Various B2B companies wanting to launch. Whether is it B2B marketplace or a B2C or kind of a mixture of both, but it's definitely a really hot area right now.
So I'm kind of curious to hear both of your perspectives on this, but I guess where I think the winners will be, you know, in this whole game of like, there's obviously going to be some winners and some losers. I think because things are changing so fast, is the companies that can kind of like be flexible and offer, you know, almost a little bit of B2C, but also the B2B, like they kind of have the ability to flex, like, oh, you know, you're a business customer and you want to buy online from us, we can give you a corporate account, you know, that corporate B2B e-commerce functionality, but if you just want a one-off, you can do that too. You know, and they kind of have the companies, I think, that have that flexibility to kind of flex up and flex down. You know, when I say flex, I mean, like, if you think about a B2B, you're really just getting a larger quantity. Like, what does really B2B mean? You're a business, so yeah, you're not a person, but you're buying in a much larger quantity generally, right? Or a larger volume or annual volume, and then consumers probably going to be buying at like a smaller volume, right? Obviously, it's a lot more complex than that, but I'm just kind of curious what you guys think. But I think the companies that kind of have the ability to kind of like I mean, obviously Amazon's probably the best example. They can flex really up and flex down to one. You can buy a pen for $2.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I've found customers I've worked with in the past, you know, they try to go into e-commerce, and the quantities and the challenges and the fulfillment side of e-commerce been overwhelming. Had to rethink, how they do it. So yeah, I think you're right though. Being able to flex in the way that your business model operates, and be able to scale up and scale down is going to be important if you want to compete with an Amazon. But I mean, there's still a lot of opportunities down here. I think there's a lot of categories where in the B2B e-commerce space, in a lot of industry verticals here, that no one's really doing anything or nailing it yet. So, you know, I'm kind of really urging some, you know, businesses that are yet to do anything, or maybe they've just been dabbling, you know, there's still time for you now. You can be the leader and own the space for B2B, B2B digital experience.
Yeah, and you know, and I agree with you on that. And I think that a couple different things to just respond to what Isaiah was, you know, bringing up. I mean, I think you're positioning yourself as a leader in something means that you're open to opportunities, right? You know, that's the key thing. So, you know, and again, it doesn't bear like us going into like 20 different examples, but a lot of the businesses I know that are successful, it's this constant like looking left, right, up and down and saying, well, wait a minute, you know, is this an opportunity that we should pursue? Is this a way that we should sell things? And in America, one of the best examples, just one that I've heard recently, is I've talked with people from like, you know, mall owners, people who literally own shopping malls, and how they're just looking at transformation. It's like, well, you know, we're going to have people living in them, then we're going to have co-working spaces, and we're going to bring certain types of entertainment spaces, and there's growth in health, and then we'll also use the old JCPenney or Sears location as a distribution center for e-commerce, you know, all of this stuff. So if they didn't think like that, you know, things would just come to a screeching halt. So businesses that are going to be successful in digital, you know, in the digital world and in B2B, really just have to continually be open, you know, to ideas. I mean, isn't it true? There's that old story. It's like, what did Sony do before electronics, right? They sold, I think they sold drinks, they sold beverages or something, right?
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, that's how you have to think, right? You know, there's always something else that comes along.
You know, like IBM, like what did they do in, you know, 1911 or whatever?
They did time clocks. They did time punch clocks to punch in to go to work at factories. That's what they did.
Now they have e-commerce solutions, you know, but I think you said something really important that I don't want to forget. And you said there's still time for people to become like a leader. And I think that's really important, because I agree. I think in most industries, you know, besides, you know, there's people like Grainger who are doing really good. I don't know if I'm sure you're familiar with Grainger in the US, big B2B companies. There's a handful of those guys, but generally, I think there's still a big opportunity to become the next, you know, Wayfair, whatever, and, you know, in B2B furniture, whatever it is, you know, it doesn't matter the category. You sell oil supplies, you know, oil drilling supplies, or, you know what I mean? Like all these niche categories. Yeah. There's an opportunity, I think, in the US and in Australia and most of these countries to be the leader in B2B experiences. But I also don't think the window is that much longer. I would say there's maybe a 2 to 3 year window right now. And to your point, you sit around in a boardroom wasting time. Should we start? Should we do this? You're going to miss all of a sudden someone else is going to be like 3 years ahead of you.
Yeah, exactly. It's, you know, it's on the other day, and, you know, they're actually a friend past workplace I was at, and they asked for some advice, and I gave them the advice, but just wasn't what they wanted to hear really, because it involved spending a bit of money to start. And, instead, they wanted to go out and try and get quotes and do all these things. And, she's ended up exactly where I told her to start 7 months later. So, it's just, the people just got to get going now.
That's part of why I started this podcast, because I can't tell you how many times I've told customers or prospects or leads, whether they end up being a customer or not a customer in B2B. And it's like, don't do this, and they don't listen. And then they end up in the exact same spot. And you're like, if you just listen.
Yeah. Because there is no other way for what you want to do. This is how it's done. And I think that's a big thing as well. I think that for people to succeed in this area, when, it's not part of your core DNA, you have to acknowledge that you don't know what you don't know, and be open to being a little bit vulnerable to the service providers that you're working with as well, because I think there's still a big thing in this area where people are too scared to ask a dumb question. And, there's a lot of, I'm sure you guys would sit in a lot of rooms and, everyone's nodding their heads like they know what you're talking about, but they don't. And I think it's kind of, getting people more open, because you can still, have a, commercial control of the conversation and strategic control with your partners, but still being open at the same time, that maybe you don't fully understand, what we're trying to do here, and, getting everyone on the same page, because I think that's really important for success. And because there's too many people in B2B organizations that have come from the wrong backgrounds to tackle some of these challenges. So, it's our job to kind of get them up to speed as quick as possible. So
what would you suggest to get more value out of a service provider, or even find the right service provider? I mean, aside from, obviously they can go to your website, which is great. I think you got some great service providers that I assume they are strong in Australia and they work in your time zone. It's probably gonna be a little bit tough to get Trellis, on your guys' time zone right now. But yeah. So what would you suggest? Because I think that what I'm getting at is, to your point, it's like you can't just go, get a quote and like, all right, I spent 50 grand.
Let's go. Yeah.
And it solves my problem. It's like you need to kind of like partner with a service provider. How would you do that? Like, if you were working for B2B guy XYZ, what would you do? Like, what's step 1, 2, 3? What were the first few things that you would do? Assuming they're kind of early, maybe they have something, but it's not great, and you're trying to make it better.
Yeah, I think there's obviously going to be some factors that would affect how you go about it, based on the company and the DNA of how they make these types of decisions, and how much time you have. But typically, let's say how I would do it, I would probably come to a provider like Trellis that maybe implements quite a few different technologies in the B2B space, and be willing and open to I mentioned before, it really involves to really get to a point where, if we're talking about getting to a point where everyone can understand what the costs are, what the challenges are going to be, how long is this going to take, to really do that properly and have the comfort that what you're looking at is real. You just have to spend some time and money up front to do a proper discovery. And I think you just save so much time and pain if you just jumped into that way earlier, and accepting that, the worst possible outcome is that maybe you come out of it and go, wow, this is way bigger than we thought. Never thought it would cost that much, but at least and at least you have potentially as well the deliverables around building a set of requirements. You can then take that to market, and everyone can bid on it properly and give you realistic timeframes and estimates around that. So I think that's the big area that people still, are falling short. Like, you get on phone calls and people want to quote on the first call. It's
And
just like, I know nothing about your business. I'd be crazy to quote, for anyone to quote you. You know, it's just irresponsible, really, guiding you down the wrong path. But I think that's it. That's the area where, you know, where you've really got to really focus in on, because that can set you up for success. You know, getting that piece and having those clear requirements and deliverables from day one
totally
makes things so much easier.
I think what I just like using analogies for people, because I think it's hard for them to understand this. Like, I have to pay money before I pay money to know what I'm doing. So I think the best analogy for people is like, it's kind of like building a house, although obviously different, but like, you don't just like go build, like, how much to build a house, right? Like, I don't know, it could be a 50 grand like little cabin, or it could be like a $10 million mansion, you know, like, and then it also depends like how much is the land, which is kind of like the platform, right? Like, are you going to buy land in like San Francisco, which would be like super expensive, or are you going to buy like land in like the middle of nowhere? You could probably get it for dirt cheap, which is like, you know, some crappy platform, and it's not going to be worth anything. So, you know, there's all these and then you don't just build a house, you hire an architect. That might cost you 5, 10 grand, 20 grand. I don't know. I've actually never hired a architect, so I have no idea how much they cost.
It's a lot.
You know, and that's a whole process. And then you have to go get a construction company. Like, there's all these steps, and that's kind of like building these B2B e-commerce sites. It's like, you need an architect. We need like discovery,
and you got to decorate that house and have a nice garden too. There's a lot.
Exactly. You don't want it to look terrible, because then your neighbors will look at it and laugh at you.
Exactly. There's a lot. That's a great way to look at it. I really
I want to break it down for people that have like, pretty much everyone understands buying or houses, right? Because it's a physical thing, and I think that's where people struggle, is because technically, in a weird way, a website is a physical thing. It's like code living on a server. It's very hard for people to wrap their minds around that.
Well, I think a lot of the analogies, when you relate it back to and how they do business today in the areas that they spend money, that's what kind of really resonates. You know, if with B2B companies, if I said you need to spend X amount on forklifts, you know, that decision, you know, we need to spend, you know, $250,000 on new forklifts because, you know, these are broken, but we can't do business without it. You know, so that decision's easy because they understand it, you know, but you're spending money on something that you don't fully understand. But I think now we're at a point where, you know, e-commerce for the B2B companies, it's like their ERP. It's, you know, it's part of the foundation now. And this is just an ongoing thing that's not going away. And that's the other thing as well, is that this isn't, I think, understanding that this isn't a one-off. This is an ongoing thing now. And you need to start to think about how you transform your thinking and your organizational structure and culture around digital, and bringing that into the core business operations. So I think still the element of people want to silo it. That's why I think that buy-in from the CEO and the senior leaders is just mission critical, because if they're not committed, and then they need to come on the journey, they can't just come flash in and out. I think that they really need to be the champion, I think, for this to work. And I'm seeing more of that, which is good. But I think, you know, I'm seeing, you know, calls the other day where I just wouldn't have expected the managing director or the CEO to turn up, and they are. Whereas, you know, there's no way they were turning up last year. They weren't.
And we've kind of gone on a journey in a relatively short time frame. So now people have had their entire career. So people who are, you know, CEOs, maybe 20 years ago, they had that first, you know, website experience or whatever they did for e-commerce. And so now it is an entire generation. I mean, I started in e-commerce in 1999. So it's really like an entire generation of people who've had their careers, you know, understanding what it is and interacting and whatever and seeing. It was so much weirder, even just a few years ago, where you'd still have some people who are like, well, I don't really shop online, you know, that you don't get that anymore, right?
Yeah.
You really don't get that anymore from
my favorite thing is the executive or who says, "Oh yeah, our customers don't really care about online." Meanwhile, he's sitting there on his phone 12 hours a day.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
Yeah, he does
that's-
literally lives on his phone, but his
Exactly.
customers for some reason don't care about online sort of thing.
Oh,
They're just
my
like living in huts, and he's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Which
But
is
he's addicted to digital, but his customers, no.
Well, then, I also have to say, because we're laughing and having a good time with this, I actually spoke with a B2B person who said, what about Instagram for B2B? Should I do, Instagram? Should I do TikTok for B2B? It's like, okay, let's investigate that and think about what TikTok for B2B means, right? So some people are just really embracing everything now, which I applaud them, even if they're not quite always the right answer, right? I applaud them for at least thinking about these things. Like, how do I use TikTok for B2B? I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, it's not a bad way to
hit
differentiate yourself.
Yeah, you could probably hit a lot of people, but I don't know if it's going to help you.
You certainly can. You can get 1 million people watching whatever you do, but we'll see.
Yeah. Well, I think that's another part to this whole conversation.
It is.
We've got foundational kind of concepts around B2B, but then, how do you scale content as well? That's a whole other piece of the pie.
There's a lot of
B2B companies as well.
I want to touch on one thing that you said, or that ties into what you said. And speaking of another partner you should get, the last episode, it's going to go live on Wednesday. We just recorded it. Is from the CEO of Peppery. So they're a B2B e-commerce platform based out of Israel. You should talk to them, because he actually specifically said that he has a lot of great Australian customers and he was impressed by Australia B2B. So I just figured he's a good guy to join your association. It's called Peppery, P-E-P.
Yeah. Awesome. I've heard of them. I don't know much about them, so it'd be great to learn more.
Yeah, I'll send you an intro. But what he said, that what I thought was really interesting is he obviously has a very good handle on the research and the pulse of B2B, since that's all they do. And their solution is multifaceted. It has like iPad, native mobile app, so you like sales reps can go and like order plus like it's kind of like a unified solution, right? So it's like your sales reps plus e-commerce, kind of like all in one. And what he was saying is, I think he said 60% of in-person across the board sales are down. So because of COVID, it sounded like he was pretty sure between like all the countries, it was pretty uniform that like only about like 40% of the in-person meetings are happening now, whether it's Australia or the United States. And that's just an approximation, but this is all leading research. So that means 40% or 60% is gone of people, that used to go in and talk to you. So the rest is maybe they're calling up. So you really think people want to call you to order? Like, obviously a lot of people want to just order online and self-serve, so.
We're having a lot of inquiries around B2B companies wanting to, solve that problem and have, assisted selling with the B2B e-commerce platform, so their sales reps are, leveraging the platform almost the same way the customer is, and delivering that type of experience now. Because it's no longer really an option.
I think you brought up a
preference.
A good way to think about this is, to make it relevant for a lot of people that don't know this space in B2B, is they do know the ERP. From my experience, for the most part, most B2B organizations, they've had an ERP for 5, 10, 20 years.
Well, they're very good at that, right? Yeah.
So I think a good way to think about this is basically the ERP, but being exposed to your customer. So imagine if you made all your customers log into the ERP, like what would happen? it would probably just be like chaos, right? They'd be like, I don't know what to do. Like, it's just
whole
like
place melt down.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, it would. it would be chaos, right? So it's like, how do you take that and bring it online? It's kind of what they kind of like. I don't know. Yeah, I'm trying to think of it in a way that is maybe helps them think of this, because they do understand ERP fairly well, but this is really just like a different layer that the customer can actually use on a website.
Yeah, and I always find, I think if I had to always keep it really simple for people, I was just saying, what we're really trying to do here is just deliver a self-service capability, because you like to do everything yourself now online. You don't like to call up. You want everything to be easy at your fingertips. And we're really just looking to digitize what your offline processes, so your customers, they can still call your sales rep. They want that relationship, but it's, if they want to do something late at night, or they want to, give permissions to people in their organization to take on some of these tasks through a self-service portal. That's what people want, the preferences, right? They want the options.
Yeah. So what, I think, is it one last topic we didn't get to? We kind of answered it. You want to take it, Tim?
Wait, what did we miss? What did we miss? The biggest problem?
I mean,
This is a good one. This is a good one. What are some of the biggest problems that in B2B e-commerce today, and how would you solve them? I guess that is a classic question that we've asked actually a lot of folks about.
Yeah, it's a good one. Well, we've talked about a few, haven't we? I would probably, if I had to just maybe give a couple, I think that the two, well, it's mainly around education, right? And that's why I think, stuff like what you guys are doing, and, what we're trying to do at the association is going to be a big step forward, because, the real problems really probably lie at the end of the day on the people side. So, getting the executive buy-in into these projects, and, digital transformation and what it means for the organization, and, then being able to attract the right talent to come and work in these companies is a really big problem. Like we said, hiring for roles you don't understand. A lot of these B2B companies, they're in unsexy locations, and, but, great thing about COVID is that now that people can work remotely, there's more options, so, people, it's less of a priority. So potentially that's going to open the door for better candidates to come in. And also, the products are unsexy, and, a lot of these industry verticals people don't even potentially know about. So, so I'm hoping that, we can keep doing stuff like this, and get more and more people excited to want to create, more content and, education, and build a community around. Because I think people learn from each other as well, like sharing stories. Like, I've been to so many, retail conferences where you've got, success stories, and you've got people on stage talking about what they did, and there's case studies and, workshops. And so I think, some of that stuff, we need to do more of it, and that's going to really help accelerate this sector. And I think it's really exciting space to be in, even though some of the topics we could talk about can be, pretty complex and maybe somewhat bland. But, it's a lot of, it's a big space. This is where all the money is. And yeah, it's really exciting.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And one thing I would add too, that is really just working with students. I've mentored students in undergrad and B school. I've guest lectured in both of those places. I've talked to student business associations, and that's been great, because a lot of people, they're very savvy about the online world and e-commerce, but they're not thinking about B2B necessarily. So just bringing it up in those settings really, directs people in that direction for their careers as well. So I definitely recommend having some of those connections, made for the association if they're not already.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and I'm starting to see, a few things starting to pop up where learning institutions are doing learning courses now, or certifications, and maybe that's something we all need to do, is get together and figure out, let's make a B2B e-commerce certificate.
I'm all for it. We should do it. We should do it.
It's funny that you say that, because we're hiring for a position, and we list certifications. It's actually a lot easier for developers. There's a lot of development certifications. But I was like, there really wasn't many that I could think of that were, this was more of a strategy role. And I was like, I don't know what certifications to list, because there's not much out there that would be useful for.
No, it's like,
yeah. I mean, I'll mention the organization, but there's a group called Terrapin based in London, And I've done certification, I've taught certification classes through them, but they're one of the very, very few companies that I'm aware of that even offered things like that. And that's been, there need to be associations doing this and nonprofits and, you know, a lot of things out there just to kind of move people along, give them more opportunities.
So
Definitely.
we're running out of time, but I want to ask, because you said, I think we all agree that education, the talent, building up that talent is really the biggest problem, because if you have more education, more talent, you'll solve a lot of these problems. But then let's say you've done that.
You've done it.
You know, you've listened to every episode of the podcast, you've read every single page of your website, you've you've got, you know, you've learned the platforms, you know, whatever, you know, then you know, I think we also kind of alluded to the next step, which is, you know, going through discovery and architecture. And we talked a lot about that, but what do you think some of the other big problems are that, you know, just warning signs so that people can maybe avoid them?
Yeah, I think a big part that gets forgotten about is customer adoption. So, you know, once you've installed the platform, what happens next? Because I think, you know, to deliver this solution, you know, typically that someone's coming in, it's driving that, let's say a recruiter, they're probably pretty technical to be able to deliver. It might have a really strong project management background, and, you know, it might take some time for them to deliver that solution. And, you know, they get you live. Let's say, you know, it took 12 months really to get this thing live properly. You know, what's the plan now? How do we migrate customers to this platform? You know, what are the strategies? How do we educate our staff about this solution? And, you know, what's the programs we're going to put in place to keep, you know, moving more revenue from, you know, growing our percentage of online revenue that's being transacted? And then what other, you know, Tim mentioned, you know, what else are you going to do? What's next? Like you got to innovate. Think about, you know, once those foundations are in place, how can we really, you know, make this sticky? You know, what's the next thing we can do? So, you know, you don't want to think too far ahead, but I think sometimes that next piece is a bit of a challenge for customers. It's, you know, and that I kind of mentioned that content piece, I think, and that's when the B2C stuff starts to come into it a little bit more, when, you know, how do you drive customers to use this platform? And, you know, getting the feedback, ongoing feedback from customers on, you know, what they think.
I think that's a really, really good point. And I thought Staples, we were lucky to work with Staples, and you know, I was talking to them about their solution. They're pretty smart about how they do it. They do have like a good onboarding process. Like they educate the customer on what their platform provides. It's not just you know, you can go and buy, but they have like a whole B2B program where you can put, like, for Trellis, for instance, we've created a program to give all of our employees like the ability to buy stuff for home, because now that everyone's like basically from home, we're like, well, you know, we know they're spending money on furniture, let's just like kind of help them out a little bit. And there's a program that they have where you can get everyone into the system, but like all through one corporate account. So it's a fairly sophisticated program, and it requires onboarding, and it's not, to your point, it's like you don't just build this great new B2B e-commerce site and then just assume everyone. A lot of times you need to like register, you know, you can't even just buy without, you know, like there's all and that needs, I think that needs to come a lot from sales. I don't know what you think, but I think sales driving this.
I think sales is integral to that, and I also think that you know, it's kind of the user group concept, the community concept that has worked in other settings that really could work for, you know, B2B e-commerce. Just get all of your customers talking in some sort of community forum as well. Doesn't hurt, you know, and if they're going to transact more business on your platform from the conversations, why not, right? So I think that all of these things are a good idea.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I think, you're right. And you really need, the sales team really needs to evangelize the platform, I think, and can continue to ongoing. And, you know, once, you know, you can start to, build that into, you know, you definitely don't want to separate, you know, online sales from your traditional sales rep figures, right? You know, the advantage is going to be that, you know, hopefully, this platform's making their job easier, and they can do more strategic selling, right? So yeah, it's really important.
Yeah. Well, this was awesome. I think it's late here on Friday and it's early, you probably want to have your weekend. So we're definitely going to have you back. And hopefully when we have you back, maybe you're in another country. I don't know. Maybe you'll have another,
we're going to have to talk about this in our next meeting, though. We really have to have this. I think this is
absolutely
great.
No, that's awesome, guys. It was great to get on and connect. Like I said, I've been following the show, and great to be part of it. Love to come back.
That's awesome.
Well, thank you very much. It's great.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Guys.
All right, thanks.